Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into the fascinating psychological architecture of cognitive behavior therapy, or CBT for short. Have you ever wondered why certain situations trigger an intense, completely outsized emotional response from you? You know, why we react the exact way we do to stress? Well, you're in the right place. We're going to break down the mind's hidden blueprints to uncover exactly what's happening beneath the surface and how our deepest, quietest beliefs literally dictate our daily reality. Okay, so here is our architectural blueprint for today. We'll map out the mind's architecture, uncover the structural missing link, and see what happens when our coping rules fail. Then we'll weigh the strengths in therapy against the critiques and limitations, and finally wrap up with the evolution of modern psychotherapy. Let's jump right in with Section 1, the mind's architecture. To really grasp this framework, we have to look at the mind as a hierarchy, very much like the structural blueprint of a physical building. In the clinical literature, there's a concept called intermediate beliefs, and they act as the absolute crucial bridge in our mental framework. They sit right squarely between our deep foundational schemas and the everyday, surface-level thoughts we actually experience. Because think about it, we don't just jump straight from a hidden subconscious flaw to a conscious thought about what to have for breakfast, right? There's a vital connection point. These intermediate beliefs basically convert our absolute rigid worldviews into the situation-specific strategies we need just to survive our daily interactions. So let's define the deepest level first, our schemas. These are your hidden foundational blueprints. They are deeply entrenched and they quietly organize literally everything you perceive. It's kind of like a structural filter for all your incoming life experiences. Now, you don't necessarily see the filter yourself, but it totally colors absolutely everything that passes through it. If a schema is flawed, the entire foundation of your mental house is poured slightly off kilter, and that alters how you process every single piece of information coming from the outside world. Sitting right on top of those foundational schemas are your intermediate beliefs. If schemas are the foundation, think of intermediate beliefs as the load-bearing walls. They're the explicit rules, absolute attitudes, and conditional assumptions derived directly from those core schemas. Essentially, these are the operational survival strategies you use every single day to navigate the real world. You construct them over years of experience just to make sure the structural integrity of your mind holds up under pressure. Which brings us perfectly to Section 2, the structural missing link. Consider a highly relatable conditional rule, an if-then statement. Something like, if I work twice as hard as everyone else, then no one will see how incompetent I am. The clinical material points out that intermediate rules, just like this one, are built specifically to protect the self. They literally prevent us from having to face a raw core deficit, like a hidden schema screaming, I am incompetent, or I am fundamentally unlovable. We build the rule to hide the flaw. And let's be honest, it's an exhausting, relentless standard to hold yourself to. It's completely engineered to keep that painful foundation hidden from both yourself and everyone else. So here is how that whole process flows in practice. First, you have the core schemas, the hidden deep flaws. Because they are simply way too painful to deal with in direct conscious awareness, they force the mind to build a middle layer. That's our intermediate beliefs, which act as a much-needed operational buffer. Finally, those rules generate the visible, situation-specific automatic thoughts that actually pop into our heads. This three-step process dictates precisely how we navigate our jobs, our relationships, the whole shebang, without completely unraveling. But what happens when an external psychological earthquake hits our building and those coping rules suddenly fail? Let's look at Section 3, when coping rules fail. The exact mechanism of this activation happens in a rapid, almost instantaneous sequence. Step 1, an external life event threatens or violates our intermediate rule. Maybe, for example, you get passed over for a promotion despite working incredibly hard. Step 2, your coping rule suddenly fails. Because that protective buffer is now gone, Step 3 hits hard. The dormant core schema rapidly awakens. The pain you've been avoiding your whole life hits you all at once. And finally, Step 4. This triggers a massive cascade of spontaneous cognitive distortions. Your mind starts warping reality with catastrophizing, personalization, and relentless all-or-nothing thinking. And what does this actually look like on the outside? Well, the behavioral result of that internal structural breakdown is usually a sudden, dramatic presentation of unhelpful clinical symptoms, or just a feeling of profound, overwhelming discouragement. When your internal rules break, the foundation shakes, and the behavioral outcome is immense distress. It's that awful moment where you feel completely stuck, paralyzed by the feeling that absolutely nothing you do works anymore, simply because your primary survival mechanism just collapsed. Now that we know how it breaks, How do we fix it? Section 4, Strengths in Clinical Therapy. For a clinical architect, a therapist, targeting these intermediate beliefs is a highly pragmatic entry point. Why? Because these rules are slightly closer to our daily awareness than those deeply abstract, hidden core schemas. This makes them so much easier for a client to actually evaluate and track in real time. It completely avoids the immense psychological distress of hitting a foundational flaw too early in the therapeutic process. Basically, it allows the therapist to start safely reinforcing the building before taking a sledgehammer to the basement floor. Furthermore, deconstructing these conditional rules cleanly exposes a client's maladaptive coping mechanics. It reveals the ridiculously strict parameters under which a person allows themselves to feel valid. Think about it. Do you only feel worthy if you're perfect? You only feel safe if you are constantly pleasing others? Once you map the rule out clearly, it opens practical pathways for structured behavioral experiments and intentional life reorientation. You can actually go out and test if the rule holds up in the real world and start dismantling it piece by piece. However, just like inspecting cracks in the drywall, we've got to acknowledge the flaws in this approach. Section 5, Critiques and Limitations. There was a very real risk of what the literature calls rationalized superficiality here. Modifying conditional logic assumes a client has a reliable baseline of cognitive flexibility. But listen, if a practitioner just reworks logical rules on the surface without addressing deeper developmental trauma or profound somatic memory stored in the body, the intervention only provides brittle, temporary symptom management. It's not true identity transformation. You simply cannot outthink a trauma response that is deeply biologically embedded in your nervous system. We also have to consider the sheer linguistic and narrative complexities involved. Formulating, tracking, and modifying these implicit structures demands heavy, abstract reasoning. This places a massive cognitive load on the client, and that capability might be entirely compromised during an intense neurobiological crisis or acute clinical depression. Expecting someone to untangle complex logical if-then statements while they are literally drowning in distress? Yeah, that's often completely unrealistic. Sometimes logic is just too heavy a lift when the nervous system is overwhelmed. So how do we address those structural limitations in the clinical model? Let's move to our final section, the evolution of psychotherapy. Analyzing the intersection of these beliefs still gives practitioners a fantastic systematic map. But to resolve those boundaries of over-rationalization we just talked about, modern practitioners are rapidly evolving their methods. They are shifting toward integrative third-wave models, recognizing that while cognitive restructuring is incredibly powerful, it's rarely sufficient entirely on its own. To fix the entire foundation, modern psychotherapy now integrates these third-wave approaches. They're blending traditional CBT logic with therapies like schema therapy, ACT, and DBT. This is brilliant because it seamlessly combines logical behavioral modifications with mindfulness, acceptance, and actual somatic processing. It's not just about arguing with your own thoughts and changing the rules anymore. It's about gaining critical, compassionate awareness of the blueprints themselves so you can achieve true, lasting psychological flexibility. As we wrap up this explainer on the mind's architecture, I want to leave you with a crucial thought regarding your very own mental blueprint. Take a second today to really think about the if-then rules you live by. Be honest with yourself and ask, are your conditional rules actually protecting you, or are they trapping you? Thanks so much for exploring this with us, and keep questioning the architecture of your own mind.